The sky was dark, covered in thick clouds, and rain poured heavily from above. The wind carried the scent of metal, fire, and death. Jackson stepped out of his ship, his boots sinking into muddy ground. He was a human scavenger alone, quiet, and cold-hearted by most standards. But he wasn't here for war or trouble. He came to search the ruins for parts, fuel, or maybe some forgotten tech to sell. The planet had once been home to an alien colony, beautiful, peaceful, and proud. Now, it was a graveyard. The war between humans and the Xyrans had left this place broken and silent. Crashed buildings, burned trees, and shattered ships lay all around. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. At least, that's what Jackson thought. As he walked between the ruins, his scanner beeped lifeform detected. He froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. This planet was declared abandoned. Was it a mistake? A wild animal? Another scavenger? Or ... something worse. He followed the signal cautiously, his blaster ready. The rain made it hard to see, his visor fogged. Then he saw it near the remains of a collapsed dome. There was movement. A figure crouched under broken metal thin, shaking and soaked. It was a woman, not human. Xyran, her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the rain. Her eyes were large and dark, filled with fear, but also something else, hope. Beside her were two small children, holding on to her tightly. Their clothes were torn, their feet bare in the cold mud. Jackson raised his weapon slightly. Not to shoot, but to warn. The woman didn't run. She didn't scream. Instead, she stood up slowly and took one step forward, shielding her children with her arms. Then, in a soft voice, she spoke. "Please. Don't leave us," she said, trembling. "My children won't trouble you. I can cook, clean, fix machines. I can be a good wife, human. Just, please take us with you." Jackson blinked. Of all the things he expected, this was not one of them. He lowered his weapon slowly. "Why are you still here?" he asked. She looked down. No ship, no food. No one came. "The others, they left us behind. My mate is dead. The council said I was unworthy to join the last escape shuttle. They said a widow with 2 mouths to feed would only slow them down." Jackson's heart didn't beat any faster. He had seen death. He had seen broken people. Something about her voice, about her standing in the rain like that, offering herself not in pride, but in quiet desperation. It touched something deep inside. The children didn't speak. They just stared up at him, their eyes wide and empty. No tears. Maybe they had cried all they could. "I don't take passengers," he said firmly. "I understand," she whispered, her shoulders shaking. "But please, ... even just the children." Jackson looked away. He wanted to walk. He wanted to turn and pretend he hadn't seen this, but he couldn't. "Come with me," he said. The woman's eyes widened. "Truly. Just until we reach the next outpost," he added quickly. "You'll be safe there." "That's all." She nodded quickly. "Yes, yes, ... Thank you." "Thank you, human." Jackson turned and walked toward his ship, expecting her to follow. She lifted one child into her arms. The other clung to her leg. Slowly, she stepped forward, limping a little. Her feet were cut, her body weak. But she kept moving. Inside the ship, the warmth hit them like a wave. The kids huddled together in a corner, shivering but silent. She sat near them, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't ask for food or comfort. She just looked at Jackson like he was the last star in a dark sky. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Mira," she said, her voice soft. He nodded. "Jackson," she smiled faintly. "Thank you, Jackson." He turned away without answering. He didn't want to care. He didn't want to feel. But something told him. This was only the beginning. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing over the ruins of the world they left behind. Jackson woke in the middle of the night. Not because of a sound, but because of silence. His ship always made soft hums, air filters, system pulses, small electrical ticks. But now, something was different. Quieter. More careful. Almost ... respectful. He grabbed his blaster and moved toward the engine bay. That's where he saw her, Myra, the alien widow. She wasn't sleeping. Instead, she was on her knees near a wall panel, her fingers delicately repairing loose wires and cleaning connectors with a piece of cloth torn from her dress. She didn't see him watching. Her hands moved like a trained technician's, calm, precise, experienced. And beside her, her 2 children slept curled up in a warm blanket. Not a sound, not a cry, just quiet breathing. Jackson stepped forward. She turned, startled, but didn't rise. "I didn't touch anything dangerous," she whispered quickly. "I used to work in engine rooms before the war. I saw your power readings were off. You were losing efficiency. I thought maybe I could help." Jackson stared at her. She looked down again. "I'm not here to cause trouble." She added softly, "I know you don't owe me anything, but I need to prove I'm not a burden." Jackson lowered his weapon and walked over to the console. He checked. The readings, she was right. Power output had stabilized. Fuel efficiency had improved by 3%. She fixed it, without asking. Without payment, without even waking him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally. She stood slowly, brushing the dust from her knees. Her voice shook slightly, but her eyes were steady now. "Because I don't want to be thrown away again," she said, not like before. "I had value once, skills, a family. When the war came, I lost it all. But I'm still here. I can still do something. I can be useful." Jackson didn't speak for a moment. Then he looked at her hands, scarred from shipwork, not soft like a noble's, and her back not bent from begging, but from carrying too much weight alone. "You're not useless," he said quietly. Her lips parted. Maybe no one had said that to her in years. He continued, "But I didn't bring you here to work." She shook her head. "I know. But I'm not offering work, Jackson. I'm offering a promise." Jackson frowned. "A promise?" She stepped closer. "I told you earlier, I can be a good wife. I didn't mean like in the old stories. I mean I can care for the ship, for the systems, for you. If you'll let me, and my children." They were raised not to cry, not to fight. They learn fast, they don't need much. Jackson looked over at the sleeping children again. He noticed it now how still they were, how calm. Even in their dreams, they didn't toss or cry. They had learned silence from survival. "You want to stay on the ship," he said plainly. She nodded. "Only if you allow it. If not, I'll leave at the next outpost as promised." Jackson turned away, walking back toward the cockpit. He said nothing. But deep inside, something was shifting. He had traveled alone for years. No crew, no company, no voices, except radio static and system alerts. And now here she was, this widow. This stranger, fixing his ship, offering herself not for pity, but with dignity, maybe, just maybe. He didn't have to keep flying alone. He sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the stars outside the viewport. Somewhere out there was another war, another abandoned planet, another broken story. But right now, on his ship, was one that hadn't ended yet, and she had made a promise. The human ship shook, not from attack, but from laughter. Childish, laughter light, careful, almost like the sound had forgotten how to exist. Jackson sat in the engine room doorway, confused. He wasn't used to this, not on his ship, not after years of flying through war zones, junk fields, and dead colonies. He peeked around the corner and saw something he didn't expect. The two alien Childermyra's quiet little ones were playing. Not loudly, not wildly, but softly, carefully, with a pile of metal bolts and old wiring. They had shaped them into tiny figures. A silver soldier, a golden woman, a miniature starship. They were making stories. No words, just hands and imagination. One of them saw Jackson. The boy didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, he picked up the tiny silver soldier and walked toward him. Then, without a word, he gently placed it near Jackson's boot and backed away. Jackson blinked. "What's this?" he asked. The boy looked up. His voice was small. "You, Jackson." Looked down again. The little silver figure had a scrap of red wire tied around it like a scarf. His scarf, the one he always wore while flying. A gift. Jackson looked at the child. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated. "Tallow. And your sister?" "She's Syrah." The girl answered quietly from behind a crate. Syrah had soft, glowing eyes, like her mother, and a small scar across her cheek. She was no older than 6 human years, but her stare was steady, as if she'd seen much more. "Your mother taught you to stay quiet?" Jackson asked. Tallow nodded. She said, "Silence keeps us alive." That answer hit Jackson harder than he expected. Children weren't supposed to talk like that. Children were supposed to laugh, cry, ask questions. But these two had learned to survive by being invisible. Jackson stood up and walked toward the front of the ship. He found Mira in the kitchen area, cleaning parts of the food dispenser. When she saw him, she stood quickly, hands still greasy. "I'll move them if they bothered you," she said. "They didn't," he replied, sitting down. A pause. Then he added, "Your kids are smart." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "They were born on a science ship," she said. "I taught them code and mechanics instead of games. It's what we had." "Not much of a childhood," he said. She lowered her head. 'Twas either that or let them grow up afraid of everything. He didn't reply. Instead, he reached into a cabinet and pulled out 2 sealed food bars. Sweet ones, meant for long travel. He returned to the cargo area and handed one to Tallow. One to Syrah. They both froze. "Eat," he said. Their small fingers held the bars like rare treasure. Then, slowly, they nodded and took tiny bites, chewing in silence, grateful. Later, while Jackson checked the ship's nav system, he felt Mira approach. "I know they don't speak much," she said quietly, "but they're good learners. They won't slow you down." Jackson didn't look at her. "They fixed the heat regulators last night, didn't they?" She blinked. "How did you know?" "Because I didn't." She smiled softly. Then she said something he wasn't ready for. "You could leave us at the next station. Or you could let us stay and be useful." Jackson glanced at her. "You want to trade your kids' work for room and board?" "No," she said calmly. "I want to show you that even those who've lost everything can still give something back." He stared at her. She wasn't begging. She wasn't using her children as tools. She was offering a future quiet, useful, loyal. Jackson leaned back in the pilot's seat. 3 extra mouths, more weight on the ship, more things to worry about. But also warmth, company, hope. He looked out the window at the stars. They had no direction, no plan, just space. Maybe, for once, he could take a detour. He turned to her. "Let's see what they can fix next." Her eyes shimmered. "Thank you," she whispered. But Jackson only nodded once. He didn't say it out loud yet, but he already knew. He wasn't just giving them a place. He was giving himself something he hadn't had in years. Reason to come back. Mira screamed in her sleep, not loud, but broken. It was the kind of scream that comes from deep inside a place where pain never healed. Jackson was already awake. He had been watching the stars pass outside the viewport, listening to the quiet breathing of the ship, waiting for morning that never really came in deep space. The scream pierced the silence. Then, silence again. He rose, walked quietly through the hallway, and stopped at the door to the crew quarters. She was sitting up now, sweat on her face, her hands shaking. The children were still asleep, curled up together on the floor beside her cot. They didn't stir, like they had heard that scream before. Too many times. Jackson stepped inside. Myra looked up, her breath unsteady. "I'm sorry," she whispered, brushing her wet hair from her face. "It was nothing. Just memory." He said nothing. She turned away, embarrassed. "You ever seen someone die slow?" she asked. Barely above a whisper. "Yes," he answered. She nodded. "I saw it too many times," she said. "And every time I had to keep quiet. For them, for the kids. I told them not to cry when their father was shot. I told them not to scream when the invaders burned the food stores. I told them to smile and obey when the council said we weren't worth saving." Jackson leaned against the wall, arms folded. "They left you behind." "More like pushed us out," she said bitterly. "A widow with children is seen as weak. A burden. The council only saved the strong. Soldiers, engineers, young ones without attachments." He frowned. "But you are an engineer." "I was," she said. "Until I married a human sympathizer. Until I refused to help build weapons against your kind. That made me dangerous." Jackson didn't look surprised. War made people choose sides. Sometimes the worst side was your own. "You hate humans?" he asked plainly. She looked up. "No," she said. "I was married to one." That surprised him. He was part of the first contact mission, she continued, her voice softer now. "He wasn't military, just a builder. He helped us construct schools, water systems, shelters." Jackson listened quietly. "He gave me kindness," she said. "He didn't see a species. He saw a person. I loved him." "What happened to him?" "He died protecting us," she said. "When the raid started, he stood in front of me, took the shot that was meant for me." Jackson clenched his jaw. "After that," she continued, "my people didn't trust me. I said I was contaminated by human emotion, said my children weren't pure enough to carry on the Zyron line." She looked him in the eye now. "So yes, I've been hated by my own, and hunted by yours. But I never hated either. I just want to live." Jackson didn't respond for a while. Then he said, "You don't have to prove yourself anymore." Mira shook her head. "I want to. Not to earn a place, but to show that I can be more than just a broken woman." He sighed. "You fixed more on this ship in 3 days than I've done in 3 months." He said. She smiled, just a little. Then he said something unexpected. "You're not broken." She blinked. "You've survived more than most soldiers." "I know," he continued. "You held your kids together. You repaired my engine. You even taught the girl to rewire the oxygen flow. That's not weakness." She covered her mouth with her hand, hiding her face. "Thank you," she whispered. He walked out, leaving her alone again, but this time she didn't cry. She simply lay back down, arms wrapped around her children. And for the first time in many nights, she slept without screaming. And Jackson. He stood in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the map. He was changing course, not to the next outpost, but to an unclaimed zone, a place with no war. No rules, no past. Maybe It was time for a new future. For her, for the kids, and maybe for him. Red lights flashed. A soft alarm pulsed through the ship, steady, calm, almost like a heartbeat before panic. Ping, ping, ping. Jackson's hand shot to the controls. The ship had picked up an incoming signal. Not natural. Not weather. Another ship. A scavenger beacon. Jackson cursed under his breath. He knew that frequency. It belonged to a crew he had dealt with once and sworn never to cross paths with again. The Bloodhound Cartel. Not killers, not pirates. But worse, they were buyers and sellers of anything valuable, and to them. Myra and her children weren't people, they were products. Jackson slammed his fist on the console. Damn it. He rushed to the rear cabin. Myra was cleaning the children's hands with warm water, humming softly in her language. The kids looked up as he entered. What is it? She asked, standing quickly. You need to hide, Jackson said. Her smile vanished. What's coming? Trouble. She understood instantly. Cargo hold, he said. Behind the supply crates. Stay silent. No movement. Myra didn't ask questions. She grabbed the children, nodded once, and disappeared into the shadows. Jackson returned to the cockpit just as the Bloodhound ship hailed him. He opened the comm. A raspy voice filled the air. Long time, Jackson, still flying that junk bucket. What do you want? Jackson asked coldly, just passing through. Got a signal. Life forms detected on board. Thought you worked alone these days? Jackson's jaw clenched. Probably just my ship's systems acting up. A low chuckle came through. Don't lie to us. We can smell profit. We're not trading. Oh, but we are, the voice replied. You've got 2 children on board, Zyron and a female. Jackson's blood ran cold. We tracked them before you picked them up, the voice continued. You thought no one was watching? Galaxy watches everything. I'm warning you, we'll dock in 5. Don't make this hard. The signal cut. Jackson hit the emergency shields. The ship vibrated as energy surged around the hull. He checked his weapons, only to stun guns and an old plasma rifle, outnumbered, outgunned, out of options. Unless he ran to the cargo hold. Myra looked up from the darkness. They're here, he said. They want you. I know, she whispered. They tracked you. She nodded. They branded my ID when the council abandoned me. Called me property. Anyone could claim me. Jackson's hands shook. I can't let them take you. She stepped forward, her eyes full of something strange, not fear, but calm. Then let me help. She pulled back the blanket to reveal an old pulse, mine teeny, rusted, but deadly. Where did you get that? I kept it from the colonies. Last defense stockpile, she said. In case I ever had to end things quickly. Jackson stared at her. She was ready to blow herself up if it meant protecting her children. I'd rather fight beside you, she added softly. He looked at the mine, then at her. No, he said. You protect the kids. I'll deal with them. You'll die, not without trying. She touched his hand. Thank you, she whispered, but Jackson didn't answer. He just turned, rifle in hand, and headed for the docking bay. The Bloodhound ship, locked on magnetic clamps, hissed as their door began to open. Jackson stood in the hallway, alone. 3 armored men stepped out, guns ready. The leader sneered. Step aside. We only want the aliens. You'll have to take me too, Jackson said, gladly. The man SMIRKED, then dash, boom, a flash. Grenade went off, not from Jackson. From the shadows behind the crates, Mira. She struck first, blinding the attackers. Disarming one with a wrench and pulling her children into a shielded corner. Jackson opened fire with stun bursts, knocking 2 men down. The leader turned to run, but Jackson tackled him, slamming his head against the bulkhead. In under 1 minute, it was over. 3 bodies on the floor alive, but unconscious. Jackson stood over them, chest heaving. Mira stepped beside him, holding her shaking children. You fought, Jackson said, amazed. So did you. She replied. He looked at her. Lee looked. Her hands were still, trembling, but her back was straight. She wasn't broken. She was surviving. Like him together. Jax Owen didn't open the engine hatch. Right away, he just sat there on the cold floor of the ship, staring at his own hands. They were scratched, shaking slightly, the blood on them already dry. Not his, not hers, but someone's. Across the room, Mira was cleaning a cut on Sierra's forehead. No tears, no complaints, just quiet strength. She moved with the calmness of someone who had done this before too many times. Tallow held a warm cloth to her side. Even the boy helped without being told. And for the first time in years, Jackson felt something strange. Not duty, not guilt, but belonging. He stood up and walked toward them. You should rest, he said softly. Mira looked up. So, should you? I've slept through worse, he replied. I haven't, she said. Offering the smallest smile, he crouched down beside them, reached into the medkit, and handed her a fresh bandage. Their fingers touched for only a second, but it was enough. They didn't speak after that, not for hours. The children fell asleep in the warmth of a folded blanket. Mira sat with her back to the wall, eyes half closed. Jackson sat beside her, close, but not too close. She broke the silence. I didn't want you to fight for us, she whispered. I didn't want to care, he replied honestly. She turned to look at him. But you did. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's the problem. No, she said softly. That's the answer. He blinked. I've lived with people who only looked at me as weight, she continued, as someone to carry. Someone to throw away when the road got hard. She placed a hand over her chest, but not once, not even once. Have you called me a burden? Jackson looked into her eyes, those dark, glowing orbs that used to seem alien. Now they felt familiar. Home, like he swallowed. You fixed my ship, he said. Taught your kids to work. Stay calm. You didn't run, didn't beg. You even saved my life. She raised a brow. So you're saying I'm useful? I'm saying you're not just surviving, he said, voice rough. You're carrying me, too. Silence. A silence that wasn't cold. A silence that wrapped around both of them like a blanket. I meant what I said, Mira whispered. I can be a good wife. Jackson turned to her, searching her face for anything false. But there was no game in her eyes, no act, just truth. Raw and real. I'm not looking for a wife, he said. She looked down. I understand I'm looking for a partner, he added. She froze, then slowly turned back to him. Partner. She repeated. Someone who flies with me, he said. Someone I can trust when the sky turns black. Someone who doesn't need saving, but chooses to stay. She blinked fast, but no tears fell. She leaned in not much, just a breath's distance, asked one question. Would your partner be allowed to care for you? Jackson's voice dropped. Only if I'm allowed to care back. A small laugh escaped her lips. Sad, surprised, but warm. I think, she whispered, we've already started. Outside the ship, space passed by like an endless sea. But inside, a bond had formed. Not because of blood, not because of duty, but because two souls tired, bruised and wandering, had finally stopped running. It wasn't stars outside the window this time. Real green, living land after weeks of drifting in cold space. Jackson's ship touched down on a small, untouched planet hidden between trade routes. A quiet place with clean air and soil that hadn't tasted war. Jackson stepped out first. Then Mira followed, holding Sarah in one arm and guiding Tallow with the other. The children blinked up at the sunlight, shielding their eyes like they'd forgotten what it looked like. No one spoke at first. The silence wasn't heavy now. It was peaceful. They had found something they thought didn't exist anymore. A place. To start over, Jackson walked a few steps ahead, then turned back. Myra stood still, her face unreadable. He tilted his head. "It's safe. You can breathe." She nodded and stepped onto the grass dot slowly. Gently, she lowered to her knees and touched the earth with her bare hands. "It's warm." She whispered. Tallow bent down beside her and pressed his hand to the soil too. Sarah giggled softly and picked a yellow flower, holding it up like a rare gem. Jackson just watched them. A scene that didn't belong to a scavenger ship. A scene that felt like home. That night, they set up a temporary shelter near a grove of tall trees. Jackson cooked from old rations while Mira helped the children clean and prepare bedding. Later, as the stars returned, Mira sat beside him near the fire. "You changed our course," she said, staring into the flames. "I did," he replied. "You were headed to the next outpost." "I was," he said. "But they don't need me. And you think we do?" He turned to her. "No." She raised a brow. "I think I need you," he said quietly. The words hit deeper than he expected, and deeper than she could have prepared. She looked down, unsure what to say. Her fingers brushed the edge of the fire-warmed blanket around her shoulders. "I never asked you for anything," she whispered. "I know. Not love, not marriage, not even protection." "I know," he said again. "But you gave all of it," she said, lifting her eyes without asking anything back. He smiled faintly. "That's because you gave something first." "What?" He reached out and gently touched her hand. "Hope." She sucked in a breath. Softly, he continued. "You didn't see me as just a human, just a cold wanderer. You saw someone worth helping, worth staying with. That's not easy, not in this universe." He paused, then with steady eyes, he said the words she had been afraid to hope for. "I choose you, Mira, not because you're useful, not because your kids are quiet, but because this life, it's better with you in it." She stared at him, motionless. Then she leaned in, slowly, carefully, and rested her forehead against his. "I choose you too," she whispered. Their hands remained joined, not forced, not desperate, just together, a few feet away. Sarah peeked from behind a blanket and whispered to her brother, "Are they married now?" Tallow frowned. "I don't know." "They should be." He nodded. "Yeah." Then both of them lay back, watching stars from a world that finally felt safe. Later that week, Jackson started rebuilding the ship's secondary shelter module into a home unit, not for a crew, not for cargo, but for a family. A real one. Myra planted seeds from a storage kit. She taught the kids how to grow food. She even smiled more often. Jackson taught Tallow to fly a drone and gave Sarah an old toolkit. The girl fixed a broken light panel in one try. He watched them with quiet pride. No blood bound them, no law declared them his, but they were his anyway, and he was theirs. Not everyone finds peace. Not everyone finds love in the middle of war, dust and metal. But when one alien widow looked at a human and whispered, "Please take me," she didn't know she was saving his life too, because in the end, he didn't just rescue her. He found himself, and he found a reason to stop running.